Already the magic hour of 2 o'clock. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. This is the Wednesday, April 9th Historic District Review Board meeting. We have, I think, 4 agenda items. Each one a little bit different. Some of them may take a little longer than others, and we'll try to get through them as best we can. So we'll go ahead and ask staff to introduce. Well, first we'll go review minutes, then we'll get into the project. So we have a review of minutes for the March 12th meeting.
I didn't find anything.
I didn't either. Nothing
I
substantial.
didn't either. I think we have, everybody was here.
Yep.
All right, so we'll get a,
I make a motion to approve minutes.
I'll second.
all right, motion second for these meetings, show an absence of 2 members at the moment. Approve it.
Aye.
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 All right,
The hard part. That was the hard part.
that was the hard part. Now we'll get into project. When we have participation in the audience, that's great.
So, hello, dear board members. I hope you're doing well today.
Good to see you.
Good seeing you guys. So, I'm missing, okay. Anyway, under applications, we have 4 applications for today's hearing. First one is 914 Newcastle Street, is currently a vacant lot in the northwest quadrant. The request is for a construction of a new single-family dwelling unit, so it's an infill development project. We prepared a little slideshow, so I'm just gonna go through some slides. So the first is the location map. 914 Newcastle sits across Washington Park and at the corner of Green Street and Newcastle Street. The zoning is T4, so the transect zoning, T4 is the second densest zoning district we have within the historic district. You can see some Google Street View shots here, what it kind of currently looks like. You can see Washington Park, the main kiosk, restrooms building there. So the owners, the Kearns family, want to construct this single-family dwelling unit. We have this rendering from the architect that kind of gives you an impression what it will look like or what it's supposed to look like architecturally. The main house faces Green Street. You have a first floor wraparound front porch with a metal roof. As you can see here on the street side elevation, so on the right-hand side, you have the main house. You have a attached garage on the left-hand side. In the middle, it's actually connected by a first-level story master bedroom. So the facts of this house, it's a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom, single-family house. It has an attached 2-car garage. It has a what I would call a granny flat above the garage. The total living space, heatable living space, is 2,853 square feet. The lot size is 6,000 square feet, so it comes up to about 59% lot coverage. Looking at the rear and the side elevations, you can kind of get an impression of how it looks like, how it's supposed to look like too. So by looking at the development code, we have section 4.7. We call these integrity guidelines. So there are 7 principles that staff looks at when determining if this project is suitable for the historic district. So we have location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association. So under location, we feel the architecture fits into the surrounding neighborhood and the district. That applies as well to the design. we have a good example of a historic house across the street, across Green Street, actually, 1103 Green Street, which kind of reflects the architectural patterns that are used here as well. The setting is suitable. It's a good infill development for that specific corner lot. Also giving that location more of a substance, especially when it comes to Washington. That whole intersection could use some more development in a more denser fashion. The materials used are suitable as well. Also reflect the Beaufort Historic District and the prevailing architectural style. That applies to workmanship. And as I kind of mentioned, the feeling, it would actually substantiate that too. So basically our conclusion, if you also look at your staff report, we have some points under staff recommendation, would be an approval under a condition of maybe scaling back the proposed massing and scaling of this new house. If I go back and if you look at the rendering here, the elevation of the house from Newcastle Street, it's continuous, so there is no break in between the main house on the right-hand side and the garage. That is not really usual in Beaufort. We usually have a main house and we have a detached, call it carriage house, call it garage, call it whatever, but we feel, staff kind of feels that the massing is maybe too much on that side. Staff also feels that the height of the roof lines, so containing the main house, as well as the heights of the attached garage slash accessory dwelling unit above and so forth, could maybe come down a little bit to kind of make it more compliant with the surrounding environment. So with the houses that are currently there. So that's basically what I have to say about this first project.
Well, thank you. We'll allow the applicant to come in and tell us what they're trying to do, and then we'll open it up to public comment period.
Hi, everyone. Megan Chancellor from Ryan here. Glad to see y'all today.
Thank you.
I'm here with Sean and Christina, the owners. And we're excited to present today. I'm just gonna make it pretty easy, or try to make it easy, and just kind of go through the staff recommendations, just number by number, or what I have my comments on. So starting at number one, I'm not quite sure if I'm hoping the drawings that y'all have are different than the HTRC drawings I got, but I just wanted to make sure that you all knew that in between the HTRC meeting and this meeting, that I brought down both the apartment and the garage and the main house 6 inches. So those drawings in front of you have been brought down from that meeting. And we are prepared to bring the main house down another 6 inches to help comply or better meet the height of the historical home across the street. Going into 1A, having the garage attached has and remains to be one of the main priorities of the property owner. That is, I would say, one of probably near the top of the list of priorities, actually. So we're not quite sure if we want to or we don't want to detach the garage. And furthermore, I think it might actually make that whole facade seem longer if we do detach it, if that makes sense, because you're just spreading out the larger forms. Going on to B, reducing the plate height at 10 foot or from 10 foot can't be allowed because that door between the garage and the main needs to be at the level of the main, if that makes sense, just architecturally and how it works. There's stairs going up to that little porch and it comes out. So all that needs to read flush as far as the front door needs to be at the same elevation as the garage door. If you're looking at the elevation, you'll see what I mean there. And then as far as the apartment, that I want to make clear that that apartment height is not at 9 foot, it's vaulted to 9 foot. So that plate height is at 7 foot. And I need 7 foot for the stair to meet code requirement. So I just want to make sure that's clear. It didn't seem like that was clear before. C above. D, yes, this can be done. We would like to bring the second floor plate height down from 9 foot to 8.6, which helps add to bringing that whole scale down to meet the historical home across the street. And 1E, the ceilings on the first floor are 10 foot. If we start messing with the first floor plate height, that starts to play with the proportions of the porches and the columns and all that, and then that starts to take away that historical proportions I'm trying to meet anyways. But we did bring it down on the second floor. On number 2, see cover page, those numbers are, there for you all. Number 3, site plan has those. 4 is comment from staff. 5, it says does not support tabby finish on the raised slab. I think so on Duke Street specifically, there's several, there's 1105, 1608, where they have a tabby finish on a raised slab. And then they have the porches with the piers with a hog's pen. Potentially we could do that to help better meet the historic facade or treatment that y'all are wanting. Number 6, yes, this can be changed. We will go ahead and do that. I just want to say overall, myself and the owners understand that the overall mass of both structures needed to be lowered, and we've done that. So far, you've seen in front of you, we've lowered it 6 inches from the original, prepared to do another 6 on the main to make sure that there's that historical look on both sides of Green Street, and keep that continuing around the corner with the wraparound porch. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We may bring you back up for more questions, but right now we'll open it up to public comment. And look like Ms. Sunderland from HBF is the first up.
Good afternoon. How is everybody? I'm still sneezing, so bear with me on that. I had a little bit of an email chat with Megan, Ms. Chancellor, but she wasn't able to attend our Preservation Committee meeting on Friday. Our committee had several comments. Most of them we were in keeping with staff comments, and it sounds like they are addressing some of the key ones that were brought up. But there were 2 things that I did want to address. We don't see the necessity of detaching the garage. If you look at how they have successfully broken up the mass and the scale of the building with the differing heights, differing, shapes around the building, they've done it really well. And yeah, that would be great if you could put that picture up. Perfect. Yeah, they've done that, I think, very successfully. We've seen other projects that weren't quite so successful that we had concerns with, probably in the last year or so, that were much longer and continued to eat up the whole piece of property. But we feel very strongly that this property is meeting the requirements of height, mass, and scale, and that they've done actually a really successful job. The one thing we would concur with regard to the garage is lowering the height of the garage because it is, I think they said at 30 feet, the way that it is scaled right now. And so lowering that would make a huge difference. And then had a question under section number 2, item number 6, which I understand they are happy to move forward with, but I want to make sure that staff understood that that was a setback. So if you go to the setback, Kurt, on here, the one that shows the actual rendering of the property. That went, you were there, that was it.
Go back to the 3D
The
one.
whole, the rendering, yeah, the other one. There you go, right. So the window I believe they're referring to is the one right behind the porch on the second story. So that window is set back. And I think because it's set back, it doesn't have to conform with the three windows that are on the front facade. So I just wondered if there might have been a mistake in that comment and that it might have been assumed that that window was forward rather than set back. But overall, we support this project and are excited that it's happening. It's right across from Wells Park, and there's only one other structure on the street all the way to the other end. I think this would fit well and would blend on both streets. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Sandra. Anyone else from public comment in the audience? Seeing none, anyone online?
No online comments, sir.
Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and close the public comment period, and this opportunity now for the board members present to opine on this particular project. And we may bring the applicant back up and staff to talk about some of these details. So I think the big thing I saw in here was two pieces to it. One, detach or not detach a garage, and then the height of the building. 8-inch or 6-inch reduction in height, to me, doesn't do a lot with this. It's the pitch of the roof that creates the height. The pitch, I think it's 10, 12 is a fairly steep pitch roof, but it looks appropriate on this building. But there may be some improvement there, or could be. The dilemma I think the applicant has is trying to connect the porch and have an interior staircase that allows it to function from interior usage. I think it's creating some of that.
Which. part
Coming
you
up
talking
to
about?
the garage height
Oh,
is being driven by the ability to get into it, right? You don't have a way from internally to get into it. So you're going to create that height requirement. And that's what the issue with the top plate. So for me, looking at this, my first impression when I saw the drawing, that is typical what's been happening in the last 5 years in Beaufort, at least, is that everybody's building on every square inch of the lot. That's totally inappropriate based on the Miller guidelines, but it's been tolerated for so long now. I'm not sure how we can turn that tide. And I'm kind of surprised to hear HBF talk like that. Is like, I think they've kind of taken the beating too and said, all right. But this is a great example of trying to put a big house on a lot that appears big. And so you're cramming all this stuff in there. And now we're faced with trying to make sure this fenestration fits. Now, I will tell you right now, this doesn't fit one iota in the northwest quadrant based on historical data. But it fits on more recent construction, and it is new construction. So I'm not telling you I'm opposed to it, but I'm kind of talking so my board members here can hear it. What is the compromise when we get a project like this? So first of all, this is a monolithic slab building. There's not on piers. It's not vented. It doesn't need to be. It's above floodplain. Okay, so the fenestration, the way it looks, it doesn't need hog fencing and stuff like that, because that'd be faux, but it may make it look better. And I'm gonna just spiel off all the things in my brain right now. I'm thinking like the tabby, the reason we don't allow tabby, the reason the board hasn't statistically approved tabby, it's slipped in on some sites in some areas, and it's been approved possibly by other boards, but Miller speaks clearly about similar materials arranged differently in the guidelines for preservation. So when we introduce that fake shell tabby into a structure like this, yeah, it's gonna look fine, and the passerby is gonna think it's oyster shell tabby. That's wonderful. It makes you feel good. All right, you got a tabby shell, but it's not a building material that would ever have been seen in Beaufort, not exposed like that. A smooth cement stucco finish, not rough, a smooth stucco finish, even delineated in brick layers, is more appropriate than oyster shell tabby on any construction in Beaufort in my mind. And we have some examples of things that slip through that I think look absolutely horrible. They look like they've been built on the beach in Florida. They're not characteristic of what we see in the fabrics that we as a board have to review on the guidelines. But it is new construction. And I think you got a great looking design. We just got to figure out how to get you there. So the issue seems to be the garage. I'm in concurrence, I think, with HBF on the separation. My first thought was, no, it should be a standalone garage. But the term is used hyphen. A hyphen is the way you separate the two buildings. They created a very attractive hyphen where the master bedroom sets back onto its private porch. So it does delineate a connector in a sense that provides you some juxtaposition, and that's exactly how the Milner guidelines articulates how construction methods could be used to minimize the mass of a building, right? So when we look at this, if you ask them to reduce the mass of the building, one, you bring the height down, two, you separate the components. In this case, I don't think separating the components is exactly needed. I think reducing the height would be helpful. And when we look at adjacent historic structures, that's what our measure is for typical elevations. That's at least the first part of a conversation. And the Miller guidelines speak to being within a story of a historic structure. One above or one below would be a typical application. Meeting it would be appropriate. So you're very close to the existing structure. I don't think that's a question really, the height. The absolute definition, the height is not necessarily a problem. I think it's the overall scale is what's scaring me.
Mhm.
The overall size of the building.
Yep.
Um,
On the
So-
subject of mass and scale, I think when I first looked at it, I had the same reaction. The thing I would ask is if this were an interior lot and it wasn't seen from the street, would we care? We probably wouldn't care as much.
Not as much.
And so the question becomes, are we creating a rule that basically says if you have a corner lot, you're treated differently than if you have an interior lot? Or should the interpretation of the code and the interpretation of the Milner guideline be independent of whether or not you have a corner lot or an interior lot? And so I started asking myself, if this were an interior lot and we wouldn't have a problem with it, then I don't think we could justifiably say, oh, well, because we could see it from Washington Street or Newcastle Street, now the massing is a problem. On the other side of that, I didn't see a landscape plan.
Right.
I wonder how much of that could be masked with a landscape plan. And you could break up the facade, break up some of the massing with some shrubbery, some trees, and some other things, if the massing was an issue. But I do think that principally there's, we maybe get into hairy territory if we would have a problem with this because it happens to be abutting Newcastle vice an interior lot.
And I didn't see that as a particular discussion point as far as because it's a corner lot. I think the way Milner reads, and it's predominantly in major corridors, is that the corner lots are typically larger development than interior lots in commercial zone, but we're not in the commercial zone, but we are in an area with a public park across the street.
Although T4 does allow some commercial uses. So the
Yes, and-
zoning does allow for some commercial.
It's
So you could make that argument. I mean, it is a neighborhood.
I mean, I drove by and looked at it and looked at the surrounding homes and
Huge compared to those.
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, the height, I think we can work within the height. I think looking at, like we talked about, 1103 Green. I think we can work within the height. I think it's the depth, the scale on the lot. Also, I didn't see a driveway depicted or any of that stuff. I mean, are we
think it's
gonna
from the
just?
I think it's from the south side. I think is it?
Okay. Because I'm just wondering, once you get, is it gonna be pervious, impervious?
You can see a
Is
curb
it-
cut right there and then
There, okay, is it gonna be pervious, impervious? Is it going to be a huge, covering all the grass in house and concrete? I mean, these are the questions I asked myself when I compared it to the houses next door and down the street.
On that topic though, of compared to the other structures, because I mean, you're right, it's huge compared to the other ones.
And
Mr.
that's
Chairman,
what- yeah.
you had mentioned that you would never see this type of stuff in the Northwest quadrant. and it's not typical of the northwest quadrant, which I agree with. I think that, to your point, it's almost like with everything else that has been allowed to develop with infill and new construction, you kind of have to, what I'm hearing is the board as well as HBF, we almost have to just play the ball where it lies, at this point.
I don't know, have we ever approved anything this large?
Yeah, I think so.
Um,
There's,
the Northwest Quadrant.
yes, I think you
Okay.
have. I mean, looking at it on paper and then actually going out once it's built, it's always bigger in life. And most, not in the quadrant, we did one in the Point recently and we advised them about scaling back and they fought us and fought us. They got what they wanted. It takes up damn near every bit of the lot. And their biggest concern was flooding. And it's like, how do you even discuss flooding issues of your neighbors or your streets or your sidewalks when you build every square inch of your lot?
Well, this fortunately slopes towards Newcastle.
Well, they're
so-
high ground. They don't have to
Yeah.
worry
Yeah.
about water, other people's water, but their water is gonna go somewhere.
Right.
So that, not having, even though, here's the irony of all this. We have the code, this meets most of the requirements of the code. The staff has been doing a great job in picking up on the pieces that we should be considering. It's been through HTRC. So what's in front of us, there are two areas. The staff recommend separating the building to make it not feel as large, but that kills the master bedroom. So here's what would happen. If you take the hyphen off and you make the garage separate, now the garage has to move to the south and then there has to be a master bedroom added to the house,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you may not have won anything at that point. You may end up with a second plan that might show, a larger primary residence in place of that small hyphen. So that's one argument there.
And this is very close to the Newcastle setback, so I don't know how much you can do with landscaping on that side.
Yeah.
But I do think that looking at the bottom left of the screen, I mean, and you see it throughout Port Royal and other parts of downtown Beaufort where you have larger structures and it's the massing is broken up by trees and shrubbery. I think there's ways to do some of that. I think this house fits in perfectly in Habersham.
Well, there goes the rub. All right, Ms. Sunderland, would you like to make a comment? Might help us.
I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you, sir. I wanted to actually address what Mr. Berman said. And that our look at this structure was not comparing it to other new infill that's been done within the district. I think it's very clear in the guidelines that you look at a building for its location, for itself, and that it be sympathetic to the architecture that's around it. No question about that. With this particular building, we felt, yes, it is an overscale structure, but we feel that the breakup of that massing and scale was done very successfully. And that if you separate that garage from it, then I think you've actually done a disservice to that lot and to the architecture. And if you look back to the 1924 Sanborn map, it's all one lot all the way to the end. So the house that's currently on the other end of that block across from Washington was a part of that same whole block. So it was big and probably at one point had several, which I couldn't find in our Vice-Right or other surveys, homes along there. I think this is an opportunity. Mike was exactly right. When you're a corner property, then you're more predominant at that location and you can support a larger structure. But I think they very successfully broke it up. The only thing that I think would make it better is lowering that garage.
I think that's helpful. I'm also in agreement. I'm not in favor of forcing them to detach the garage. I just think that there are maybe some ways to explore some landscaping. I don't know if there's other creative ways to help break that up. But I don't think, I wouldn't want to put them into a position, and I don't think it's far enough outside the ballpark to where we would need to force them to detach the garage.
So I think we have a census on the detached garage piece. Before we move any further, do you guys have any issue me allowing the public comment to continue? No?
No.
Mr. Washington, come on up, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had not planned to speak. My name is Fred Washington. I have an interest in the park across the street. As has been stated, something of this size is not normally in the northwest quadrant, at least in my memory, and I grew up in the area. My concern is that the builder also recognized that the park is going to be a very active park. There's going to be a pavilion built there. It's under construction now. There are going to be activities, plays, other gatherings, and I'm concerned, one of the concerns I have is that they understand that there will be noise. Okay, that's number one. Number two, that the drainage issues that you speak of, I hope that it does not intrude or come to the park and has an impact on the park. So whatever is done, please do that. I like the idea of the screening and the other things, because one of the things we try to do with the park is to get as much green around and all around, because it has a history of kind of a rural type environment, not fully developed, because it was a playground. Not against, matter of fact, a classmate of mine used to own the property across the street that this is being built on. Don't have a problem with that, but just sensitive. We are changing, the area is changing, but let's not have, let's take into account those other activities and facilities that are in the area now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Washington. Jeremiah, did you want to speak too?
Yeah, if you're allowing more
Chairs
public
allowed to
comment.
speak.
All right, go ahead, sir.
I didn't think this would be controversial. I live at Jeremiah Smith, 1107 West Street, about 4 blocks from here. I bring my kids to this park too. I actually think that the massing would be helpful to help define the park that's right there. Our streets are so wide, they feel wide, people go fast. I think this would help make our streets feel like spaces, and including the park. I don't think it's that big. It's 6,000 square foot lot, 4,000 is the minimum. It's only 59% lot coverage. That's not a lot. So I don't think it's an issue.
Thank you for your professional opinion, sir. All right, well, let's keep the public comment closed now and let's continue debate. Let me see if I can go through this a little bit. The hyphen or the garage, that seems to be a major sticking point. Any issues? I'm okay to approve it as it is.
I'm okay with keeping the garage attached.
Okay, how about you?
If it means enlarging the house, yeah, I'm okay with it. And I do like the way it is much lower, as Lisa mentioned, so yeah, I'll be okay with it.
Okay, so let's move on to another item of discussion for the board. I think the issue is, could you possibly lower the garage in any fashion, I don't know if it's even possible, to create a better appearance or a appearance more appropriate to meet some of the comments we've heard?
Are both sections 10-2 roofs? Is the garage also a 10-2?
It's, yeah, the inside dimension on the drawing is represented that way. So, but they made some compromises, not in this drawing, to reduce.
Right, they already dropped it
6
6 inches.
inches.
Yep.
I mean, is 6 inches really enough?
Yeah, you can come up and speak to that, because that is a bone of contention here.
Sure. So in the drawings, it's dropped 6 inches, and then we're proposing me verbally up here today that will drop another 6 inches on the main house. So the main house,
The second floor.
yes. So the second floor is currently at a 9-foot plate height, dropped to 8.6. So that front form was going to be,
A little bit squattier.
it'll be a little bit smaller. The I've dropped.
What does that do for the interior? I mean, what's the impact to the homeowners?
6 inches from their living space and just ceiling height. So it's a second story. That's fine. They're fine with that.
Stairs.
Yeah, they're okay with, it'll still feel like a
You guys
great
don't
space.
care?
With the upstairs, we're fine.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Do you feel that by dropping the main house down has any impact on the garage, helping the conversation about the fact that the garage appears so tall compared to the main house, even though they may be equal? I mean, if you lower the house, you're gonna lower the garage as well.
I lowered the garage 6 inches from its original design. I think if we start going down I'm sensing that the garage is kind of the sticking point for you, and I understand. I totally get it. We all understand here. Um, I don't want to veer away from a 10-12 pitch because it's historically pleasing, it's proportional, it's done all over town, it's beautiful, it's elegant, it's aesthetically pleasing. But the homeowner said that they could go to a 9-12 pitch on all the roofs to help with that, if that's something that you think would help with the massing. I think they're prepared
And
to do
that's in
that.
addition to dropping the plate heights?
On the second floor, yeah. So it would
That would-
all be coming down a good bit from its original design, yes. Yes, sir.
So we're talking dropping, that'd be like another 6 inches,
6 or more,
Mm-hmm.
maybe 8 inches of pitch
Maybe.
change.
yeah. And it's all adding up, right? So it's a.
Yeah, I mean, when
to
you
have-
drop that line down, you know,
Yeah,
in 2 inch difference in the pitch design over the span, it's definitely gonna drop it
I
some,
agree.
so.
Yep.
I think that would be a big help.
Well, anything will help. I mean, we try to get a bite at the apple. We're trying to do the right thing and protect the character of the district, and that's what this is about. It's new construction. How do you protect the character of the district? If I could turn the clock back, I'd say you're not gonna build a house this big. We're not there. We're current day. So how do we minimize some of these things like the tabby, the roof heights? In this case, the accessory dwelling. You know that Beaufort does not typically have garages as an approved process. We call them carriage houses, and they're always detached. However, I can guarantee you, I can drive around Beaufort right now and I will find a garage attached to a house. So the argument's kind of tough to say, don't do it, but it's not typical. So here you have an owner, buys a property in the National Landmark District, hires a designer, comes through the process, does a great job with the design, and it kind of fits. It really doesn't fit Beaufort. It fits, and I'm bust on Allison Ramsey, it fits Allison Ramsey concept. Because it's raptor tails and everything. You know, if you built a house back in the day this big, you would never have an exposed raptor tail on it. Raptor tails were invented because they didn't have the lumber to wrap the soffits. It was an accident, and it's created an architectural design that's been capitalized by some local design professionals. Now it's the Beaufort look. So we have a beautiful home that's not characteristics of the historic district, but it is beautiful.
Well, I think what you're hitting on is that little by little, places change over time, and this is the way in which places change over time.
Yeah.
And you can't change that.
No, and
The,
it's not our job to change. I mean, it's our job to try to hold the line on certain areas. I
Right.
think we're doing a fairly decent.
Or
job
you
there.
shape the change as the, you know, you
All right,
shape and mold it.
let's get back on the bullets that actually have to make this, because this is conceptual, by the way, folks. This, you know, so they have,
I went in for conceptual and preliminary.
pardon me,
Conceptual and preliminary.
and preliminary?
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
How do you,
But I'm happy to take final.
how do you do both at once?
I'm
yeah.
happy to go with final.
Well, this
I wanted
is
your
final.
feedback.
This is giving final on
Yeah.
on the sheet.
Okay, I thought another
But
letter.
I would be happier with it being conceptual / preliminary, and then come back with a landscape design
Yeah.
and see what, you know, a 9-12 looks like.
No, I don't think it's cooked enough to get to final.
Me either.
So, you know,
Yeah, I definitely want to see the landscape plan and the bringing down the pitch. Yep.
Well, so I'll comment on a few specific
Go
bullet
ahead.
points.
please.
Where is it? The comment about the window, one of them was about the window.
I was a little confused on that one about the front.
Oh, that's.
Oh,
the
it's
front
item
window.
number 6. I don't agree with staff comments on that. I think I agreed with Ms. Sunderland's comment. I think it's set back. I
Mhm.
think if you tried to raise it and align it, it would actually impede on the roof
Can you
line.
show me which one you're talking about?
That little window.
This one right here.
Oh,
So
that
they're
one.
saying align that. If you align that, and you
Line up
can't
with
do that.
what?
I think they wanted to align it here. I don't think it would work. And I also think because it's set back, it's not an issue. It's gonna be.
Well, it
shit.
probably really is. You haven't built it yet. The problem is when you put a window in like that, what elevation do you put it? Do you put it at the top plate? Do you drop it down? Is it elevation off the floor in the finished space, or? is
That
it-
would be my assumption. You do it off the finished floor. Yeah.
The bottom of the sill is the finished floor, but if you put small window that low, it looks pretty odd. So it looks like it may be already the same number of inches below the plate. It's hard to tell. All right, but I don't.
Well, so my point is, I don't care about that window.
Yeah.
I'm fine with
All
that.
right, that's
window.
6. You're not worried about that, all right?
The tabby finish, I agree with you. We should rework that so it's not a tabby finish.
Mhm.
I had a little bit of heartache over the board and batten, although staff seemed to not care about the board and batten. I think the Milner guideline is pretty specific about board and batten and vertical siding not being typical on main structures. I know the bottom is lap board and the top is board and batten. I like the way it looks. I just don't know.
Well, it meets the look, Miller doesn't specifically say board and bat is not appropriate, right? What it says is use similar materials arranged differently, and I think that's what board and bat does. You know, so we have and it also talks about defining the fenestration, so we have lap siding on the first floor, and then we go to board and bat on the second, which helps make this building, I think, in my mind, maybe make it look smaller.
Well, board and batten, in my view, the vertical lines stretch out
Yeah,
the height.
but I think too.
I think lap board would make it squattier. But that's not a hill I'm willing to die on,
Okay.
so I'm just throwing it out there.
So you had 6, and then you went to, 5.
Yep, so 6, I don't care about. 5, I think the tabby does need to be restudied. Either smooth stucco or, faux piers with hogboard or something. 4 is good. So not 6, 5, yes, 4, yes. What is setbacks? 2 and 3, fine. We're gonna nix, my opinion is we nix 1A. I'm okay with keeping it attached.
Okay.
We're not talking about reducing the height of the garage unless we are, except insofar as we're talking about changing the pitch of the roof. If we're doing conceptual and preliminary, my desire would be, let's see what a 6-inch reduction and a 912 roof looks like at the final.
Okay. So B.
And that would be basically B through E.
So you went through A and B on number 1.
I went through all of 1. So B through E is all height stuff.
Yeah.
So I would lump B and E all together and say, if the applicant's willing and it doesn't affect, it doesn't materially affect what the owners are trying to achieve, let's take a look at a 912 roof with a 6-inch reduction on top of that when they come back for final.
Okay, anything on the fenestration for the,
What I would like, if there's any heartache over any of this, I'd like to hear what the heartache is, though.
well, we'll let them bite that in a minute. Let's make sure there's nothing else on the house, because they're asking for, at this point, preliminary. I thought this was conceptual. See what it says.
It says final on here. I
I'm,
don't think it's ready for final.
no, I'm not ready to,
I would like to see a landscape plan with final. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, you can ask to see some idea of landscape plans. It's really, landscape plans not something we typically have preview over. It can help and it should be encouraged.
Is that something that would be inappropriate for us to ask for? I'm happy to be told.
No, I
that.
think you
We
can ask,
usually
you can
get
ask
it.
about anything.
yeah, we usually get that.
I think understanding some of those things, like, I think, does it have the tree topo on here now? Because there's already some landscaping on the lot.
There was a sheet, it was kind of blurry.
Yeah, there's one here, so.
It said there was one specimen tree. Was there one
There's a
live oak?
picture of it there. We
Two?
got a couple of palms, one.
Live oak in front of the house on the Green Street side.
Yep.
Do you want-
Obviously, we planned around, and then on the, Newcastle side, on the, basically right where this break is between that, are the 3 palms that we're gonna keep. Not talk about landscaping on the park side, there will be 3 palms that remain where they're at, and the house was situated around those.
Is that where the front,
So that might be helpful. You're the architect? The design, is there a way to show that on a rendering to see how those?
well, the
But-
drawing shows 3 trees coming out where the garage is.
That's, see in the photo, that's where all that kind of jungle starts. Yep, on the, is this, no, just those three trees are kind of in that big mass of foliage there on the left side of the photo. So the palms are gonna remain, and then the large live oak in the front of the lot, of course.
Yeah, so one of those palms will cover the garage area. It looks like.
Yeah, minor. Okay. Let's don't get hung up on the landscaping because that could die in the next frost, so. I mean,
True.
I love visualizing those things and acting like it's real. That's not real. What's real is that we have investment in our city and we encourage that and we want people to have successful projects and protect the district at the same time. Yeah. All right, so you seem like, I think you know where you are. How are you doing down here on this one?
I'm in agreement with Eric on pretty much everything. I am not ready for final approval on this project because there's still too many questions.
So staff recommending final approval with those conditions. So they must have seen enough stuff to understand that they have submitted it. Now,
Did y'all? No.
Excuse me, but that was an error.
Oh,
It-
okay.
It wasn't meant to be final, but just for today's
supposed to be preliminary
discussion, for
final.
today's discussion as a conceptual preliminary
Got it.
all right, so
with the conditions. So basically approving the conceptual preliminary plan under the conditions listed.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm ready to make a motion.
all right, so are we gonna ask them to come back or something? Are we gonna do it preliminary and they get their final through staff? Is that what you're telling me?
I think that I would like, I think there's a lot of detail here. What I would want to see to give a final approval would be the cut sheets, window details. I would like to see a landscape plan. I would be interested in seeing what a 912 looks like. Colors, things like that. I think if all of that was brought back at the
So
next
you're telling,
iteration.
what it sounded like we're in preliminary then. So-
Right, preliminary, because I want to see this myself, not just
All right, so
grant.
you know where you're going. That's the
Yep.
reason I'm asking the questions, because we're gonna get a motion here so we can move on, but
Yep.
the key is, I think that we're all on the same playing field here at this point, the three of us,
Mhm.
and it's preliminary, not conceptual, and it's not final. So we'll need a motion that articulates that, if you guys are in agreement what we said, which summarized was that the setback or the garage connector is fine. The elevation needs to be tweaked best they can and presented on another drawing to show us what it looked like. And it'd be nice to understand the potential landscape plan. It's not a requirement in my mind. And then the window's okay, be left alone. And I don't see any other fenestrations that need to change. It's all about the height at this point,
Mhm.
okay?
Do you want to give anyone a chance to comment before we make a
Can,
motion?
well, does anybody, does the owner have anything to add to this before we make a motion?
I am. I am Sean Kearns, and no, I mean, we came down here 4 years ago and fell in love with Beaufort, and when we met with Megan, the one thing we said was we want to fit in with the area. So, I mean, we're listening to you guys. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. On the driveway, I know somebody said they didn't see a drive. There's a service road on the far end of the lot that will be going in to get to the garage. It'll be kind of hidden because so people can't see the garage from the street.
Will it be concrete or will it be?
It'll, we haven't decided yet. Yeah,
It's a dirt lane now. It will remain that way, that they'll have to turn into something.
yeah, it'll probably be that fine gravel that's on like the access road now.
Like crush and run or whatever?
Right,
Okay.
yeah, all right,
Right.
that's it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, look, I think it was time to entertain a motion.
Right.
I'll make a motion to give preliminary approval. And I'll enumerate the different conditions. As the staff conditions are written, we will nix 1A And then 1B through E will be combined into a condition to review it as a 9/12 roof, in addition to the 6-inch reduction for the main structure that was proposed. We will concur with staff recommendations 2, 3, 4, and 5. And Nick's staff recommendation 6.
You gonna second that?
I'll second that. Yeah.
Okay, did staff catch enough of that to make a reasonable motion? All right, so we have a motion and a second on the floor. Any other debate or questions from the board up here? Don't see any. I'll call the question. Mr. Bergman?
All right.
I'll support that motion.
Aye.
Okay, that's how the process works, folks. Welcome to Beaufort. Okay, good luck with your process. Let's see if we can get you back here and get this thing finalized.
It's nice to see an infill.
Yeah, well, it's taken a long time. I'll tell you a long story about infill. All right, so let's go to the next topic of discussion, which will be item B, 909 Washington, and we'll let staff introduce that one to us.
There's Miss Kim.
Oh, and we have our other board member back. Thank you.
Welcome to the stage.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman of the Board, members of the board. I'll be doing the presentation for 909 Washington Street. So let's. All right. So here's the first slide. It's just the location. You're right in the middle of the 900 block of Washington Street. It's an interior lot. Here's the zoning map. We are T4HN. All the properties surrounding it are also T4HN. Here's the current front view of the property. This is the pre-existing house. This is for an ADU that's going to be placed behind the house. The pre-existing house, it's a non-contributing from 1960 house. It recently underwent modifications, renovations. So that's the front view. Here's some renderings and the conceptual of the ADU. So the size of the main house is about 1256 square feet. The size of the ADU is 614 square feet. But when you add in the front porch and the rear porch, it increases it to 713 feet, which is 56% of the main house. So it does surpass the 50% requirement. But we'll get into that in a second. I guess just going over the integrity guidelines for the location. It meets it, it's an above average sized lot with a relatively small primary home. There's plenty of space in the rear to fit the ADU. It still conforms with all the lot width, the lot coverage standards, the setbacks as well. The design, we feel that it does complement the architectural design of the main house after it went through its renovations. Setting as well, it's residential in character. It fits in pretty seamlessly with the rest of the neighborhood. Again, it's gonna be placed behind the front house, so it won't really be visible from the street view. We feel that the materials are appropriate. For the most part, we'll get into a little bit of that in the staff recommendation portion. Workmanship as well. It's got, relatively typical Beaufort style. The feeling also, yes, it doesn't negatively impact the historic feeling of the neighborhood or historic district. Let's see. And just to go over a quick little extra background with the project, the applicant has attended multiple rounds of HTRC meetings. The lot overall is an 8,000 square foot lot. It meets, again, as I was saying, all the coverage requirements, setbacks. There's no tree removals proposed. It is within the Old Commons neighborhood of the historic district, with most of the buildings on the block and surrounding area made up of mostly one-story, single-family residential with a couple of two-story houses nearby. In the surrounding houses, it's a relatively even mix of contributing and non-contributing. moving on to the staff recommendation. And here was also a slight error with the final approval. It should be a preliminary approval. But, so we do recommend approval with conditions. So the windows, as presented in the cut sheets, they appear to be 6/6 windows. We would like to keep them 2/2 to match with the primary house, which has 2/2 windows. I know that 6/6 are common on historic structures, but for a new ADU where the existing main house doesn't have them, we don't suggest going with 6/6.
Where do you?
Did they change the drawings?
Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just don't see where 2/2 is on the main house, but keep going.
And we can go back to the picture real quick. So here on the main house, so they did keep, as part of the renovations, they did keep the large 1950s mid-century modern kind of main window. But then the other windows surrounding them are 2/2. So we just want them to match with those as shown.
Right down. I call those 1/1.
Yeah. That's fine. Yeah, those are really not 2/2 windows, if that's what's in the fenestration here. But
We'll talk about it.
we get into that weeds. All right, so
So keep going where you left off.
Yep, so for the siding, it's a board and batten style siding. We would have originally preferred to have them match the existing house, which they renovated it with stucco. But if you do look at a small portion of the house in the front and the rear, on the right-hand side where the little walkway connects to the house, that portion previously was, I wasn't sure if it was like a wood siding or vinyl siding, but so for that portion, they did renovate it with the board and batten style. And also on the rear, the same kind of small portion on the rear of the pre-existing house also was renovated with the board and batten style. So we feel having that precedent there, it's appropriate for the ADU to have board and batten style siding. Moving on to the window sills and heads. We just would like the applicant to provide the details for the windows, the fascia, the columns, and just to make sure that they match with the existing house. As of now, those details haven't been provided. The vinyl windows as proposed, and I've actually already talked with the applicant between submitting this recommendation. They said they will be moving away from the vinyl windows, but when we submitted this presentation, that was the details, the United 1800 series windows being vinyl. So, we just request for them to select a different style that is not vinyl. And then again, with the overall size, to keep in conformance with the code that says that to not exceed 50% of the footprint of the main house. Currently, as proposed, it's 56.77%. So just a reduction of 6.77% of the total square footage of the ADU will be required. In talking with the applicant, they're proposing to just remove the rear porch, which would get them to within the limit that they would need. But I can let the applicant kind of speak on that. And that is all.
thank you very much. Do we have an applicant here today? Pardon me? Zoom, okay. Is the applicant available?
There's a hand raised. I've given them permission to speak.
Absolutely.
Hi, sorry, I was unable to speak, but that's great. Glad we were able to get back on here, but thank you for reviewing all of this. And yes, to just reiterate a couple of things, we are going to move away from the vinyl and move towards a wood window, and also did propose taking off the back patio, leaving the front in conversation with Nick to keep the character element of that to get to the right lot coverage amount. And then actually, I think somehow maybe this was miscommunicated, but we were actually proposing a full stucco exterior to match with the bulk of the current existing structure. The board and batten was only replaced on that one side because that was siding before. Everything else was stucco full way around. So we plan to do a stucco exterior as well in the ADU with a gravel driveway that would extend off of the back of the existing parking driveway. So that is really my 2 cents, but happy to take questions or anything like that.
Great. We may ask you some more questions. We'll get a public comment period and then we'll see what the board has questions for you. But so please stay available if you can.
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right. Any other public comment? Oh, Miss Sunderland.
That's right. Lisa Sunderla, Stuart Beaufort Foundation. Hi, Nicole.
Hi, how are you?
I am good. Nicole wasn't able to join us at our committee meeting on Friday, but we did take a look at the property. And I'm glad that, that she clarified that it is going to be stucco because that was one of our key recommendations. And as y'all know, I am a mid-century fanatic, right? So if we're going to do something in the rear that is sympathetic to the front of the building, I would suggest going with the more horizontal window. That's what our committee felt comfortable with, rather than the 2/2 that staff had recommended. And you're correct, it was 1/1, were the other ones on the building. And I fought for that, for the middle ones to stay. So critically important, but I think a horizontal configuration rather than a vertical configuration of windows, important on that structure. And we had also felt that it was too soon for it to be final because there were so many details that were not available in this packet. So I'm glad to see that it was actually preliminary. Is that correct? Okay.
I
good.
was under the assumption that this was final, but absolutely
Final.
good to hear.
Yeah.
Yes, that's final.
It did, but I think Christopher said, go ahead.
Uh-oh.
I think we might have made a little mistake, just looking at it, that they don't meet the, it's up to you, but I think probably in its current state, it should be a preliminary or. So
We'll have that discussion
you
here.
you got no windows, materials, the size is too big, that's a lot of stuff, to give a final, and so.
All right, thank you.
So those were my comments, and I did have one question. It is currently up for sale right now. I noticed it's been on the market for 15 or 18 days. So is this idea, Nicole, that it would be a plan that would transfer to another owner? What were y'all thinking?
No, at this point, we're actually going to be removing it from the market and keeping it. I have been out of town. I actually got to talk to Julie about this and haven't gotten to remove it yet. But this is actually a plan for my husband and I to make the footprint of the property work a little bit better for us and some family. So I think we will be removing it from the market. We had originally made the decision to put it up once the original one was done, and then got some ideas swirling in our heads. So that's the evolution of the game plan.
Absolutely. Well, it's a terrific house, and I think you have an opportunity to create a terrific accessory building in the rear. So thank you.
Of course.
All right, any other public comment? Oh. Mr. Smith.
Jeremiah Smith, 1107 West Street. I just want to talk about the overall size. I've been vocal about this before, but I don't think the 50% rule is a good one. We have buildings of all different sizes, and tying it strictly to the size of the relative size of the house, I don't think makes sense. And I think you guys have the authority to make an exception, small exception on that. For example, removing the rear porch doesn't help anybody. No one will know from the street, and they will have less outdoor space to enjoy. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Washington.
My name is Fred Washington Jr. I reside at 804 West Street. I own the property behind this proposed development at 910 Green. I have two sisters that own the adjacent property on the right of this property at 905 Washington. Sister's concern, well, my concern is the siting of the building itself. Will it be immediately behind or where siting, I guess? And I want to make sure it's not too close to the property behind, nor too far to the right, where there is kind of a garage little working space that they have, and that would create a problem. The other concern is, will there be some kind of screening as it goes back, particularly on the side? My sisters who own the property to the right, 905 Washington. You can see the initial fence going, her fence that she put up is halfway back. And wondering, did the developers plan to add something that will add some privacy to the ADU that they'd have? Also like to mention that the property that I do own at 910 Green Street was approved preliminarily for an ADU to be back there too. So that's why I'm trying to make sure it's not, you don't have the siting becomes important. And I hope that you take that into consideration. We welcome the development. I think the owners of the property have done a great job. I looked in there and I know what used to be there and I know what's there now. So they've done some good things. Our family had hoped that we might be able to do something too, but not in a position to do it. But I am concerned about the siting, both to the right where my sister's property and behind where mine is, and the fact that hopefully there'll be another ADU on the other side. You don't want to have people literally shaking hands. We're not looking for that. I think that's it. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you,
the
Mr.
opportunity.
Washington, for your comment.
Congratulations to the developer.
Any other public comment? Anybody online like to talk about this one?
No, sir.
Okay, we'll close public comment and we'll bring it up to the board for discussion. This will be a preliminary discussions that we're having. And we will start the process. It's an ADU, so typically an ADU could have come to us for final if all the pieces have been there, but there are some fragments that seem to be sitting out there.
Could I maybe just ask a quick question?
Yes, ma'am.
Forgive me because this is my first time going through this process with you if I don't know this, but we did do an administrative adjustment to account for removal of the back porch, which should have brought us back under that number. And just made some adjustments prior to this meeting today that I was under the assumption would have been relayed. So maybe I misinterpreted, and that's certainly possible, but just wanted to make sure that those were accounted for.
Yeah, I can speak on the administrative adjustment. That was discussed as an option to get closer to the 50% requirement. But no application, we haven't actually gone through with the administrative adjustment as of yet. That was depending on what comes of the meeting today. That was,
Sure.
a potential option, but
So right now, that adjustment has not been applied to this application.
Correct.
Telling me, okay, very good. We'll have that debate up here.
but y'all can grant the adjustment.
Yeah, we'll have that conversation up here in a minute when we get to that point. Thank you for clarifying that. All right, so
Uh,
basically we have an ADU that by the current code, and I have to agree with one of the audience members that 50% doesn't always seem to be a great rule. But in this case, that's what we're starting with. And we do have the right to make an adjustment by a certain percentage that may allow them to keep the size as designed. Okay, so we're gonna find that out. That's one question I'd have. The finishes of it and the siding, I mean, I think the siding, the setback, everything, Mr. Washington's point, the code has very specifics on where it can go and where it can't go. So I think that's
Yeah, directly behind them.
directly behind the house.
Mhm.
It sounds like the board and bat in the picture is not what the applicant's trying to do. They actually want to do a stucco finish, so it matched the main house. The window, I think it was a little confusing because I'm not certain when that house came before the board for
I have a lot to say about that.
changes.
I was gonna say,
I got a lot.
I don't remember.
But the
it at
window,
all.
I mean, just so that an applicant, listen to this, the windows that are shown in the photograph of the structure before renovation showed 2/2s, and staff spoke to 2/2s. And it's actually 1/1 windows in there now. So either the windows got changed during renovation. That's a past fact. I'm not gonna go there. I have no idea how that happened or whether it was approved or not. I don't really care at this point. What I care about is what are we gonna put in the accessory dwelling?
Tell us, Kurt. Tell
I
us.
think
what-
that was, Nick's, this is your second time he's done one. I think he just made a mistake, so.
Was it shows, the one thing is,
No, 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 which,
No,
can
okay.
I, can I
yeah,
jump
you
in?
clear it up.
I would like to jump in. I've walked in this house before the current applicant, before the current applicant bought this, we looked at it, our firm did as a potential acquisition. And then I just looked it up. It's kind of risky actually on the applicant to come up here after they've already done a renovation without coming through the board. Because Google Images shows that they were 2/2 windows probably 6 months ago, and they're now 1/1, and they look like 1/1 vinyl windows, which were certainly not there.
I apologize for interrupting. I just want to clarify that we were told we didn't need to go to historical board review because it's a non-contributing structure. And so we did this with the city staff. If I had knew there was a different process, I absolutely would have followed it in accordance with your guidelines.
I think if you got away with murder, then that's good on you. I have no complaint with that. I'm just pointing out for everyone here that they were 2/2 windows between when it was acquired and now the structure has already been modified.
My biggest problem is that they were vinyl.
But we don't.
We don't know that. I don't know that. I'm saying they
All
appear.
right, hang on. Let's reel this in a little bit. First of all, that's not in our preview. This is existing building put up here. It was just a mistake comment made about 2/2 and maybe looking at that old photograph
Correct.
compared to what's actually here today.
That's what I was referencing.
That's water under a bridge, all right?
But it is worth the staff making note of.
Yeah, they need to understand that, but the applicant went to staff to find out what they could do, and there are things on non-contributing structures, like replacing windows, that don't need to go to HRB. Okay?
Yes.
They don't have to come to us, ask for that.
Right.
They may have done that, so I'm not gonna say they didn't, all right? I think that the question now is, what window are we gonna allow them to put into the ADU?
Well, right. So I was getting to that.
Okay.
So my point is the structure's already been modified, whether legally or not is not, if you got away with it, fine. I almost want to give you kudos for that. The structure that's there now has 1/1 windows. The main big window in the front does give credence back to, a 2/2 more mid-century modern window, which I think would be appropriate to try and match that on the ADU, at least to bring something back. I don't necessarily think they have to be wood windows. If it's non-contributing, they could go with fiberglass.
Okay.
So that would be a consideration.
They match. What they're trying to do matches.
Right. Well, you would go, I don't know what the current houses windows are made of, but you certainly have that 2/2 on the front. So you could pull from that and put that on the
That's what
ADU.
they're showing. They're showing a 2/2, I mean, a 1/1.
1/1 that matches.
That matches the back.
I'm saying it would be almost better to go with 2/2 in the back since they stripped the main building of 2/2.
No, we're not going there.
Well, it's an opinion. You can disagree with the opinion.
Problem with them getting through, I have a problem with them getting through. Because, I mean, we can't go back, but this just opens up the door for other people to try to go around it. And I
They
don't
didn't.
like that.
They
They
didn't.
didn't.
Hang on.
They didn't. The
Hang on, let's clear the record here. I do not feel anybody went around anybody. That building, what was presented to us today is what we see. That's it. Plain and
And
simple.
If I could just add, the main house, it did get a COA issued for it. I don't recall if the windows were specifically mentioned in the COA, but they did get approval for renovations of the main house.
And it's non-contributing, and the only reason it's here because we're doing a new construction.
Right, so we're ruling on the new. I get it.
Right, we're ruling on the new. We can't get caught up in the old that much.
But I'd like to call it out.
You did.
Separately, the 50% stuff, the ADU 50%. So the code is very explicit about 50%. You're saying we have the leeway to adjust away from that. A former chairman said the same thing. Where are we given the authority to do that?
It's in the code that we have administrative, the staff and the HRB has the ability to give, and Kurt will explain it to us. But there's a percentage, is it 30%?
35%, man, I put on the Google map.
We have
It's just
room to
terrible on my phone.
massage some of these things when they're appropriate to do it.
Well, then I have no problem with it.
Okay.
Okay,
Well, that's what they suggested.
well, the code states footprint.
Right.
50% of the footprint. It does not say, and I think that's what Jeremiah was referring to, is that it's footprint, not, square foot living.
Beaufort
space.
County, development code specifies heated square foot as a requirement for ADUs, whereas the city code talks about footprint.
Okay, and
well-
so is 9.10.23 design exception. You can make any modification, found in Articles 2 and 4 for projects that have unique characteristics that justify a deviation from et cetera standards, up to 35%. And there is some review criteria. There's got to be compatibility, no adverse impact, and consistency with adopted plans. So,
Okay,
just so you know.
well, then I'm fine with it.
Okay.
And there was, I had two other comments I wanted to make, before giving up, control of this microphone. The Mr. Washington's comments about the location of the site, these are my 2 cents on that. I think that those concerns are completely valid, but if they fall within the appropriate setbacks, that's a neighbor to neighbor conversation. Get on the same page with your neighbor, maybe they can adjust it within those setbacks, so it's to everyone's benefit. But from my perspective, if it's cohering with the setbacks as is, I'm not gonna say move left, right, up or down, if that
Yeah,
makes sense.
We don't get into that. We too
Right.
much. The placement, as long as it stays in the setbacks, is generally not a discussion that the board opines on. I mean, because they save the trees, they meet setback requirements, and they meet screening requirements for like mechanical equipment and such, and that's it. So I think we're good. All right, so you had, I didn't hear any real valid concerns there, so.
I think it's mostly hidden. I think it's a fine ADU. I think it's hilarious what they got away with, but that is what it is. It being stucco is fine. If they wanted to keep it 1/1 windows, it's fine. That matches what's there currently. I don't think they have to go with wood. They could go with fiberglass. I think either one would be fine. Yep. The stucco exterior is good. I'm good with the footprint being 57%, now that I know I can accept that. And it sounds, yeah, so they're not doing the vinyl, so that's kind of where I stand with all that.
Okay.
I think there was a gentleman in the back who had a comment. I don't know if we want to open it up.
I'm always open to hear public comment. Come back up and talk to us if you'd like, but you're gonna have to come up here. No, we need you up here. There's cameras and microphones and recordings.
And you know what, I might be going back, but you're talking about 909 and the house. And I just want to make sure that I'm on the same page. I actually own 911. So on the front, those windows, I believe, are fiberglass or vinyl. And they're not allowed in the historic district. Am I correct? I'm just,
Well, we don't know what they are on the main house.
Right.
And it didn't come before this board. It went to staff at any permitting they did on the
Okay.
work.
so that's who I go to?
Yeah, if you want to ask, yes, you can, that's nothing, no preview of this board. If you want to, after the meeting, meet with staff and ask them questions, you're welcome.
Awesome. I appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on with the conversation. So siding, you didn't have a problem with. Stucco, you don't have a problem with. The windows as presented, do you have a problem with those?
They showed the diagram, or the renderings show 1/1, which I think is fine based on what's currently on the house.
Okay, that's where we need to stay, in that
Yep.
lane. Okay. Any comments related?
No,
Anything? on-
no, not really. I would have liked to have seen, maybe more windows so it had a little more. Or maybe But no, I think it's fine. I think the size is, it shouldn't be an issue.
What I find interesting is this is the juxtaposition we're in the city. We have a possible mid-century modern that's been been altered again. We're doing an accessory dwelling in the back to try to match that. We have no real guidelines for that. You know what I'm saying? We have a lot of guidelines for historic character abilities, but we don't have guidelines for the mid-century modern style construction. So if we were held to that line, it may look a little different, but I'm fine with what they're trying to do. I have more concerns about stuff like the hard surfaces and, you know, how you get sidewalks and driveways and how much concrete you pour, because it looked like the neighbor had the same thing. Mr. Washington's sister built a concrete driveway on the property to the right of it. So is it inappropriate? No, but it typically was not allowed at one time in history. So we're down that road again. Usually it was a pervious surface was required, not impervious surface.
You did say it was gonna be a gravel drive.
I know, no, that's the other
That
applicant,
was the previous applicant, I thought.
the previous.
Lady.
She said,
I'm still here. It is going to be a gravel drive to the ADU.
To the back, off the left side.
The
Okay.
pre-existing drive is gravel, and so the plan is to extend that out towards the ADU, to provide them parking.
Okay, perfect. So let's get into the staff recommendations so we can get a motion on this one.
Mhm.
But I don't hear a lot of opposition other than
No.
concerns, but, so the number one staff concern was, or the number one item in the staff list was the 6/6, which I don't think applies. Right?
right.
Am I on the wrong sheet?
No, you're right, you're right.
You're right.
I don't know where even 6/6 came in.
I don't- What if you look, I'm telling you, look,
No, not at the old house. I'm looking at this. They had to look at drawings somewhere.
they looked at photos from the original before they modified. These used to be 6/6.
No, they were 2/2s.
They're 6/6.
Grills in them?
Yeah, those ones, SDLs. And then these are
Oh,
2/2.
on this edition.
So this was
6/6 and this was,
These were 2/2.
okay, I'm only seeing those. All right, it's fine. Keep it up here on the board and let's finish
They were
this.
betrayed by Google Image.
Okay. So number one, we're not concerned about, number two shouldn't be a problem. Number three should not be a problem.
Or they
Number
address.
4 is a problem because staff has rejected the vinyl window and they would like to see a fiberglass window, used on the ADU.
The applicant said that they would do wood. They said that they
They
submitted.
could do either one.
Right.
So it'd be a wood clad window is what
Right.
it would be. So it's probably gonna be aluminum or fiberglass. I mean, they could do wood, but getting the rating
necessarily,
is gonna be tough.
Yep.
And then number 5, we give them an allowance to try to get it to stay in the size they have, right? Based on the,
I'm okay with them keeping the footprint as presented.
okay, so number 5, keep footprint. All right. All right, just sometimes the simplest ones get a little complicated. All right, so let's, anybody have any other comments constructive towards this project? I don't hear any, so let's get a motion on the table.
I'll make a motion.
Mr. Motion, go right ahead.
I'll make a motion to, actually, let me ask a question before we do
Sure.
that. So is there consensus on this being a preliminary approval? Or do we think that we could give the conditions that cut sheets of the windows and colors go to staff for final approval?
I'm okay with that.
I think
On the
so.
new construction, especially ADU, all the other conditions of it. How does staff feel about that?
They don't care. Okay.
You not let them have vinyl windows, huh, Kurt?
All right, so then I'm gonna make my motion in that direction. So I'm gonna make a motion to give final approval with the following conditions, and I'll enumerate them based on what's in the staff recommendations in the packet. So number 1, the windows will be 1/1 windows. Number 2, as stated. Number 3, as stated. 4, will be either wood or fiberglass windows as the applicant indicated. 5, the board is okay with nixing, or my motion is that we're okay with nixing number 5 and leaving the footprint as is. And then I'll add a separate condition that whatever cut sheets or colors are not mentioned those need to be provided to staff for final approval.
Okay, I hear a motion.
I second that motion.
We have a second. Okay, any other debate? Only thing I would comment before we make a vote is that, to get final, we won't see that. This passes, the applicant will need to take those cut sheets and get it to staff, and staff have to make the final gesture to approve this. And so the only thing missing at this point, sounds like, is the administrative adjustment. Well, you know, we grant it, they still have to write it. And two, the cut sheets on the windows, and look at the stucco finish and make sure it's a cementous stucco like what the main building is, right? That seems to be the main ingredients to this question, right?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
so I'm clarified, all right? And then any other debate? None? Call the question, start down here.
Aye.
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 Okay. Thank you, wherever you are.
I'm I'm here. Thank you very much.
Wherever you are.
Okay.
That was a fun one.
All right, well, let's get to item C. I know Mr. Smith is dying to get this one over with.
We could take our time on this one.
All right, this should be easy enough. 701 Green Street. So we have a prominent contributing structure, house from 1785 at the corner of Green and Carteret. So you can see the location on the map right here. It's catty corner from the USCB campus arts building right there. Currently, I think it's used as an inn. Not quite sure though. Zoning you can see is T4N, so along Carteret Street, this is the current view. Actually not from Google Maps, but from the applicants. You can see the side, the rear views here as well. I did include some historic pictures just to kind of give you a sense of what it looked like when they did the inventory back in the late 70s, early 80s. That we have here in the department. So you can see the rear. So basically the request here is to add a brick wall in the front, so facing Green Street as well as the side, so that would be towards Carteret, as well as I'm sorry, I have to backtrack. So there's going to be a hedge in front facing Green Street, a hedge to the side of the main house facing Carteret. Then at the corner of the house, so the rear corner, it starts to be a brick wall. So there's going to be a brick wall of 6 foot in height that goes to the property line, and then it goes inward. So it's going to basically kind of envelope the garden. It's going to create a garden, a backyard, basically. So, and then there's going to be a brick wall and also a hedge. So we're adding hedges and brick walls to this site. The applicant also would like to add a staircase, so making the now newly created private garden accessible from the rear, from the back porch, which it currently is not. Historic pictures somewhat show, so if you look at the picture view from the south, you can kind of tell, kind of, I believe that, well, there has been a somewhat of a staircase, but it's really hard to tell. So they're proposing to do a brick staircase that would basically come down from the rear porch to the garden. So I enclosed a picture in the exhibit. This is the kind of style that they want. It's actually an example from Washington, 701 Washington Street. So that kind of style, that's what the applicant basically wants to do here as well. So you have kind of the pillars, and then you've got a little lower brick wall section in between. So that would be like kind of a good example of what is proposed for that brick wall along Carteret Street to the back. And that's basically it. So if you have final questions for the applicant, feel free to ask, but staff has really no issues. The allowable height is 6 foot, which the applicant has stated for the brick wall. It fits in perfectly. There are many, many examples of such a brick wall in the historic district, so it is in compliance in design with what the applicant wants to put in there as well. It fits well to the structure, the contributing house and location, so we don't have any issues. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. Applicant?
Thank you for that introduction. Jeremiah Smith, Allison Ramsey Architects, 1003 Charles. Yeah, I think staff did a good job explaining what we're proposing. Happy to answer any questions, but if I could just jump straight to the findings. I think what staff is saying is that even though it's not within what the code says, that it's okay, and there's a lot of good examples that show that, that it meets the intent of the code. Just a few specifics on number 2 for the staff recommendations. We would like to match the paint colors that exist on the main building now, possibly even the brick base of the rear porch could be painted to match the existing brick on the house. That was a later addition, at least part of that rear porch. And then hopefully you have the brick cut sheet. Okay. And we are thinking to paint the gate that will be wood to match, but the bricks would remain exposed and unpainted on the wall. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. All right, let's open the floor to public comment. Sunderland.
Good afternoon, Lisa Sunderland, Historic Beaufort Foundation. Jeremiah was able to join us at our committee meeting on Friday, and the committee is overall in full support of this project. We think it'll be a good addition to it with the brick wall. It's in keeping with the 7 integrities, and the addition of the stairs on the rear also works perfectly with the architecture and is in keeping with the preservation guidelines. As he said, a portion of the porch is not original to the structure, so this helps to really kind of complete the rear of the house, because the way that it looks right now, it just doesn't appear as if it's complete at this juncture. So we are in full support of this project.
Thank you. Any other public comment? No one online?
No, sir.
Nobody wants to talk about a fence, okay? Well. All right, we'll close public comment and bring it up here. I mean, this is fairly easy. Obviously, fences are approvable in the historic district. The neighbor has a brick fence, very similar, covered with ivy. Their height is taller than the code allows, but if you plant ivy on a fence, you'll get almost any height you want, so. As long as you make the main fence meet the code, you're good. I agree with Ms. Sunderland's comment about how this might complete the rear of the house. That rear addition on that house was put on without permit at one point in history, and it always seemed to me to be unfinished. So I think putting a fence line around this with brick and landscaping and creating a garden behind that house will minimize the impact of how that rear porch and those arched openings in brick don't really fit the scale of that structure in my mind. But so I applaud the applicant for moving on down with the work they've been doing on the property, renovating the rear cottage. And this will kind of finalize that in my mind. So I'm in total support of it.
I think if anything, we should just have Mr. Smith come up here and walk us through detail by detail how they plan on building this fence.
You want to know what color mortar they're using and all that, right? Okay. So look, I think this is a fairly straightforward. I mean, there are times when we ask about the brick, there is a cut sheet in here. I think it matches close to what's on the building now, right? The mortar color would be very similar, and it wouldn't really matter much because at some point it'll probably get covered with big ivy and it will continue to patina over time. So
I would make a motion, but I've already done two.
All right, can we get, this is a simple one. Somebody else can volunteer for 'em?
I'll make a motion.
All right,
I would make a motion to approve as presented.
it's a good one.
I'll second that.
We got a second one. Wow, that's the first time we've had that in a long time. Okay, so we have a motion on the table and a second. Any other further debate? You sure you don't have anything to say about it?
It's great. It's fine.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
easy.
I'll call the question and let you answer first.
Aye.
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 Mr. Smith, go build your fence. All right. All right, we're gonna close this one out with, the last package, item D, which is 602 Bladen Street, new construction, and Mr. Ramsey's team will still be at that.
Okay, this is 602 Bladen Street. There's a request, a conceptual request for a new house. And so, you can see it here on the screen. An interesting part of this lot is it, is kind of carved out of the Bladen Street redevelopment district. So, both other sides of the street are in the Bladen Street redevelopment district, and everything around it is in the Bladen Street redevelopment district, but this one actually is not. And so what does that mean? It means you have to approve it. Whereas everything else in the Bladen Street redevelopment district is administratively approved. But you can see the zoning here. And then the current street views. I think everybody's kind of aware of the area that's around it and what's around it. It used to be kind of a commercial area in the past, but it has a lot of commercial uses now. And so what they're proposing is a little over 2,800 square foot home that, and you can see the layout with the drive kind of coming off of an alley that's already been platted on this project. And these lots have already been created. But you can see the essentially a 3-story with a 4th story on top there at the corner of King and Bladen Street. And so and you can also see that it's right, what it looks like next to the, I guess it's like a old office building, if you will, that I think got moved there years ago, on the top right, what it looks like with the height, with the two next to each other. And here you can see some 3D I can't talk, visualizations of what it would look like if it was built. So looking at the code and if you refer to your packet, we looked at the integrity guidelines. Again, they're requesting a conceptual approval. Location, so you know, this is a prominent corner on Bladen Street. It's obviously conducive to dense infill development, or more conducive. It's a really small lot. If you didn't notice from, oops, I don't know what happened, but it just turned off. Let's see here. Oh, there it goes. It's a very small lot. I'll just go back to that. And so most of the lot is really going to be made up with the actual building, but sorry about this. Design number 2 is, I think the staff believes this is conditional to the height, as that, and to a few other things with the design that the thought is that the height is out of scale, because that 4th story is, if you will, the 4th story, the 200 square feet of basically conditioned space would be considered a 4th story in our code. And that's in your packet there, the reference to that. And so with that, it wouldn't be allowed per code. And so, you know, I think it's kind of almost a little bit of a moot point, I think, unless there was going to be some changes that wasn't going to be an enclosed space, or, you know, more of an open, I guess, kind of bar area. But right now, you know, that's a big issue. The setting, again, you know, again, kind of feel like the height is out of scale, and there are mixed uses in the neighborhood. There is a 3rd story. As everybody knows, the Black Chamber of Commerce is 3 stories, kind of a block away. So you know, the 3rd story might be met, but a 4th story is just, you know, I think a little bit out of the question. So that's why we're putting conditional there. Um, Conditional on materials with the thought that the lower floor windows should be larger because it almost reads as a mixed-use structure, because there were commercial structures on this street and the building's right up against the street. So those, let me just go to that, it doesn't screw it up. Just a thought that in the conditions, that those lower windows should, on the first floor should be bigger, to kind of match a more commercial window setting. Then, whoa. Sorry about that. And then, workmanship, we feel like it meets the overall Beaufort architectural style and feeling. Again, that's back to the mass and scale of the height. And then the staff recommendation, obviously to scale back to 3 stories. So, we were requesting to table this because, you'd have to take off that whole top part. And felt like maybe it would be best to just have a new submittal, for you to make a decision on that. Basically no faux windows, and those, I was just stating that the first floor windows be a little more commercial in nature. Shutters should not be, faux shutters should be included. That's in the design manual. They're supposed to be workable. The faux railings on the 3rd floor should be avoided also. Windows on the east facade, we believe that should be enlarged. The lot coverage is something that, I think I've kind of referred to as that, it's a little bit of an issue because it's a very small lot, right? And you're basically filling it up with a house. And so that, that is a little bit of a concern. Frontage build out with the T4, and which has a max of 85%. So that's something to think about because essentially they're completely building out the frontage. And so there is a max on that. And then eaves, reducing the depth to 4 feet max. But again, this is conceptual. And I think the important thing is that I think we all think it's a really good design. And, something of this nature is appropriate there just to, lower that scale a little bit to be more in keeping with what's around it in the code itself. So with that, I'll turn it over to the applicant.
Thank you. We'll let the applicant come forward, see what he can do with this one.
Mm, yeah.
For you.
Can I hand out propaganda?
Do you have some?
I do. Is that
All right, we'd
appropriate?
love to see propaganda.
Just because I don't know everybody. Just for reading, not today.
Boy,
Thank you.
all right. I like free stuff.
No, I'm definitely not going to run for city council. I'm Cooter Ramsey with Allison Ramsey Architects, and I'm actually nervous today, believe it or not. I've done, I don't know, a lot of these. And it's rare to feel that nervous energy. I kind of have to shake it out, get settled in a little bit here. Do you have that PDF that I sent you by any chance? Oh, thanks, Kurt. Renderings are
Sort of
here.
in a 2D fashion, if I can get this to work. Of course. Weird. It's not. There it is. So I think
We'll just leave that for now. So I almost called for a special meeting on this one, but I respect you guys' time and I didn't want to put you through such thing. I'm really trying to pack 25 years into about 15 minutes. So I'm going to go as fast as I can. It's going to be a little choppy, but I want to give you a history of Bladen Street so that you understand the context here and kind of why we brought to you what we brought to you. So our first master plan, and I sorry, I don't have the slides, was in 2001 on Bladen Street. We did a pro bono plan for the city of Beaufort. They had a workshop. They got together. They said, what should we do on Bladen? What should happen? And we kind of helped them formulate a very crude vision for what Bladen should become. And it was kind of funny, even though this was a long time ago, the important issues at the time to the community were speed limit, lighting, and landscaping. That was pretty much it. The things standing in the way for the city were money, SCE&G, DOT, and lack of available space. So not a lot of that stuff has changed over the last 24 years. But the basic vision and idea for Bladen Street was to kind of cut it in half. It has a very prominent residential scale all the way down to Duke. And then the idea was to convert it to a much more urban fabric all the way down to, is it Bay Street? I'm not good with streets. I know the place, so trust me. So we basically started setting a vision back then for what we should do and how we should do it. And you can see that if you go out there today. You know, if you look from Duke up towards the National Cemetery, sidewalks a little looser. It's not as urban. We've got canopy trees, we've got lighting, we've got parking. It's definitely kind of a softer residential scale. And then when you turn and look the opposite direction, the urban qualities begin, right? You've got a big, long area of sidewalk. You've got palm trees, more vertical. The street comes in. Everything gets a little bit more intense. That's not by accident. It was designed that way. It was intended to be that way. And that was the vision back in the day. So that was back in 2001, some of the very simple things that were set forward. In 2005, we actually brought a project in front of the historic district for the old liquor store site, which is 711 Bladen Street. And it looked like this. And we got it approved back then. And that sort of started to set a new tone for the urban part of that street and what it could become. And the whole idea for Bladen Street was, you know, it should be the sister street to Carteret. There's nothing there. There was never anything there. It was really dilapidated. It was in bad shape. And the idea was it could take a lot of pressure and a lot of relief from growth, right? Like everybody's coming. We know it's coming. Where can we put them? Well, hell, here's Bladen Street. Let's put them here and let's give the opportunity to create a new place and to create a nice street. So more time goes on. In 2010, we actually got hired by the city to look at from Duke Street down to Bay, that commercial street. And we worked with the redevelopment authority. They had a specific name, but we worked with I think they were called the redevelopment authority at the time, and prepared what is known as the Bladen Street Overlay District. And it was a pretty intense process. We basically went parcel by parcel, met with every owner, discussed their property, their needs, and tried to incentivize them to redevelop their sites. And the basic idea was the city was about to redo that section of street again. They had already done the residential portion. It was time to do the commercial portion, and they didn't want to put all that money into the road and get nothing out of it. And, you know, that's kind of the worst thing you can do, spend $4 million and you get no tax dollars out of it because nobody builds on the street. So in an effort to really kind of pump that street up, redevelopment authority went to the owners. We said, hey, we're going to give you a special area. We're going to give you special rules. And here's the district. And, you know, we went through and basically went site by site and said, this is what we're going to allow you to do, right? Like, we're going to take away your parking requirements. We're going to allow you to redevelop the site. We're going to allow you to come in here and do this. And this went in front of city council, very public. None of this was hidden. This was all kind of done out in the open and adopted and put into place. Mike, were you on council then? You were? You know all this history then. So that was 2010 when we kind of said, okay, let's get this stuff going. Let's do it a little differently. We wrote architectural guidelines for the area. We did the overlay maps. We kind of set it up for success and got it in place. In 2011, I think it was 2011, the Black Chamber of Commerce came to us. They had seen what we had proposed in this on the site that the liquor store was on. And they said, we want to do this project. We started down the path of doing that project, and that got built and is up. And you guys have probably seen that. That's a really quick history of 24 years that brings us to today and why we're here in the first place. So what I was hoping to do though is to just kind of set the context for this street. It's not your typical street. There is no context to this site. There has been a vision in place for many years, and there's still a vision in place. It's just not been fully executed to this day. To go back and to even address the issue of why this site's not in the overlay district is because the current owners didn't believe anybody, right? They were not the current owners, I'm sorry, the past owners. They didn't trust the city. They didn't think any of it was going to happen. We were asking for right-of-way areas so that we could build sidewalks. There was an ask from the city, and the property owners didn't believe any of it was going to come true. So they said, no, thank you. And in the truest form of spot zoning that you've ever seen, we carved that site out and said, okay, if you don't want to be part of it, you're not part of it. Luckily, we didn't get in any trouble for that yet. So where are we today? We are here to bring you what we think is a very appropriately scaled building. And you guys are going to hear all the no's, right? And you've already heard them. No offense. This is your job. You've heard the no's. You've heard the why you shouldn't do it, what's wrong with it, what it doesn't meet rule wise, and all of that stuff. I just want to give you the opportunity to hear some of the yeses. I wrote myself a few cheat notes. Context, sensitivity, and design intent. This thing is rooted in Beaufort. When you look at the building, you can clearly see all the Beaufort elements, all the Beaufort massings. Is it taller than other stuff? Yes. I'm not trying to hide that it's taller, but it's taller with an intent, and I'll show you why in just a few. The material, the craftsmanship, everything in line with what you would expect. Additionally, there's kind of a respectful evolution to this building. It's not trying to copy the past. It's not trying to mimic anything. It's of its place, of its time, of its location, and of its context. The scaling, massing, I know everyone immediately thinks it's too tall, but it's intentionally tall where it should be, and it's not tall where it shouldn't be. And what I'd really like, and unfortunately I don't have the PDF, I'll share it with you guys if it ever comes back. But it is, we looked at several scenarios early on of where the mass belongs and where it doesn't belong. And we've intentionally pulled the mass of the building away from the existing house because we think that's important. And what that does for us is it does make us go taller on the corner. We also think that's great. I'm not shying away. I want this to be anchoring that corner. When you come up from Bay Street, I want you to see this house. I want you to be wowed by this house, and I want you to be inspired by this house. I want it to kickstart things being better in Beaufort. I know you've come into town, you kind of see what's going on around here. You see all the kind of lack of character in the humdrum that we're getting, the 4- and 5-story buildings that have no detail, they have no character, they lack charm in every direction. We think there's an opportunity here to change that mindset and actually inspire people to do a little bit better. And we want to do it with this project. When you're coming down Bladen Street, you can see in that rendering, you'll see this building, but barely. That tower is pushed back off the street. It's not up on Bladen. That's intentional. We want it to kind of be pushed back. The existing live oak tree that's across the corner does a beautiful job of anchoring that side. We're letting it do its work. And then back on the main building, we'll kind of do our part as well. It's not a huge mass. It is tall though, right? Like it's taller than what's around it, but there's nothing around it. I got a 1-story building on one side. I've got an empty lot on the other 2 corners that hopefully will get filled in one day with sizable structures, and they have to go somewhere. And this has always been the place, right? Bring them here, do it here. Let's take some pressure off of downtown and let's pump up Main Street and make it a little bit better. Let's see. I don't know if there's anything else critical I need to tell you guys before the question and answer starts. Oh, just to back up, this is truly just height, scale, and mass, right? there's a lot of details on this. There's a lot of, well, what about this and what about that? I would love for you guys to stay away from all that stuff and to truly just consider this building height, scale, and mass. And, you know, if I've told you anything that's wrong, correct me, deny it, fine. If you hear what I'm saying and I can explain it further and get you guys there, my goal is just to get you to approve this from a height, scale, and mass perspective so that we can then start the process of all the other stuff, right? You know, it doesn't meet a 4th story requirement. That's correct. We'll have to get a variance. It's not the first time. Every building we've done that's been substantial in the city of Beaufort has had to get a variance, right? We've done it on houses. The one on Carteret and Boundary, we had to get 11 variances to build that. And it's a 2-story building. So, you know, there's a huge process to doing something different, and it all starts right here. So, you know, even if this were in the district, Kirk would have kicked it back to you guys anyway, because he's not going to approve a 4-story building at that location. He wants to keep his job. So if, yeah, absolutely. I would have done it too. I wouldn't have done it. So height, scale, and mass is truly the focus. I hope you guys can back up a little bit and don't fall victim to it's too tall, it's too tall, it's too tall. Think about the vision. Think about Bladen Street, think about inspiring people to do a little bit better in this town, and give us a shot. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ramsey. All right. Quite a bit. All right, so now we're gonna move on to public comment period.
I love you, Cooter. I want you to know
Just
that.
put some earplugs in.
Okay. This is a tough one. And for a couple of reasons, and it's interesting that we had the other new infill project across from Washington Park today and are able to kind of look at, you know, two different projects that are large scale that have come in for y'all to look at today. Your history, your narrative, I get it. Very, very good and very well said. But what you've got to think about is the context of this structure. And when I say context, it's not the core commercial district. It's a neighborhood commercial district and has always been a neighborhood commercial district. Over the years, buildings sadly have been lost. If you look at the 1924 Sanborn, on that lot was a 2-story structure with a 1-story wraparound porch. Across the street, block over, across from Paul Trask's, Naomi's property, that was a 1-story building with 3 lots, a 1-story building and a 2-story building with a wraparound porch and a 1-story building with a wraparound porch. You take a look at the property at 604. And 604 used to be on North Street facing the courthouse. That property was moved, and Mike should remember this, probably the late 70s, when that was relocated by the Patterson family over to where it is now. It originally had double-tiered wraparound porches that fell off in the period of moving, and so when it was moved, those were no longer there. That building is oriented facing King Street rather than facing Bladen Street. So right now it would face the side of this new structure. Nothing wrong with that, except, you know, you want to make sure you keep, you know, a separation of that because Mr. Trask wants to keep that still as the front door of the building. So the key piece when looking at this right now, it is a prominent corner. You can say that, oh, the 4th floor is set back, but boy, oh boy, can you see it on that prominent corner when you're heading from Bay Street, going in that direction. It's extremely visible. So you aren't hiding that at all. I know that it was mentioned today, we're looking at height, mass, and scale, or conceptual, I guess. But the key thing with it is that there are some elements in there that are conflicting with the design. It's a beautiful design, no question about that. But is it commercial or is it residential? So there's a blend along that portion of the street. In some cases, if you look at the old Shines building, you look at Naomi's building, where they were historically, or the Shines was commercial on the bottom and then probably had residential upstairs. And that's what's happening with Naomi's property. So all of the little detailing that you see on the building, even though I know you're not looking at that today, that does not meet the requirement of workmanship under the 7 integrities. Just by saying, hey, they've got some of the architectural features that you find within the district, does not mean that that building is sympathetic to the architecture in the district. They just stuck on some corbelling, stuck on, a cornice, some decorative design on the building. And then from the standpoint of the 2nd-story porch, that's a more Charleston feel with what looks like, louvered shutters that are going around the top of it. So anyway, my point being, and not to criticize, because I think it is a beautiful design, but I think it needs to follow from staff's perspective, be more reflective of the mixed-use commercial on the street in its design. Show that, be more respectful of the historic structure, which dates to the 1890s, that's immediately adjacent to it. And you can be modern and you can propose modern, but it should never overscale the adjacent historic property. And if y'all look in the guidelines, which I know you know, protection of the district in reviewing new infill must consider scale, absolute size, massing, orientation, proportions, materials, form, and siting. So if you look at all of that with regard to this, that design unfortunately does not fit the way that it is currently scaled within the district. If you remove that top part and fix the conflict currently with the various decorative materials on it, and gives it a cleaner look and larger windows on the bottom, maybe, that could work better on the street. But I think right now, it's something that needs more time and more work to be sympathetic. And I think it is important to note, it is not in the redevelopment district for whatever reason. It's not in the redevelopment district, so it should fully meet the guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Anything online?
No, sir.
All right. Okay, we'll close public comment period and we'll bring it up to the board for review. And remember, this is conceptual, and you heard the applicant speak to you about the fenestration part, and it really in conceptual, the massing and scale of a building is the most important beginning point. And if we opine and favorable on mass and scale and conceptual, they have the authority to continue down that road on the development. So they have some rights bought in once you opine and vote in affirmative to support kind of what you see. I would much rather the applicant had brought us a less defined structure to review so we could actually see it as the mass and scale, which you're asking for. Yes, sir. You want to comment? Go ahead.
If you don't mind, I did consider bringing you less because I totally agree. But unfortunately, sometimes you gotta get enough detail to prove that you can execute in the end to satisfy everybody. So there's no right answer, but I did find even though I didn't have the slideshow, I do have this with me and I want you guys to take a look at this.
Let's pass this around as we're discussing it. Okay. So,
And what that is the existing house and then the proposed structure beside it in streetscape, and then the Black Chamber of Commerce just put in there for other end of the block relative
That
scale
helps a
so
lot.
that you could see it. Also, though, what's most important in that is the one below is a previous study where we did not have the 4th story on the building. And, unfortunately, what happens is you bring it down and put it into the building and it just spreads out the building. So if you look at the third story relationship of what we will end up with when we smash things down, right? Like it's, it's like a piece of clay. You smash it down, it's just going to spread out, right? So it's not like things are going away. They're just going to move over. And I think that drawing is quite compelling to explain that it's just going to, it just waters everything down. It just kind of takes away from the existing house next door. All of a sudden that massing is softer and just not doing much. That's it. Sorry.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rand. All right, so board, we've got quite the laundry list from the. All right, come on, let's keep this all together. Let you take a look at that. That's just what we're showing folks who can't see that as a comparison. All it is a stick drawing of the three major large buildings on that street side by side, so you can really see the mass and scale, which helps because the Black Chamber of Commerce building is the most recent new construction with the largest massing and scale on that street to date. And right, wrong, or indifferent, that building's actually too big. So in scale, but now we go back to the applicant's presentation on history. There are a lot of factors that take place in how a city evolves. And Bladen Street indeed was a place that a lot of focus of local government tax dollars and brain cell loss was done to try to jumpstart that into town to anchor the main part of our city. So if you understand how at the tennis courts, the main light is there, that's the only second corridor to get to the water. So council years ago, even before my time, was trying to figure out how to get our city to more balance and get the traffic patterns and bring people down a corridor that would take you to the water, that would get your first impression to be what we all take for granted, this beautiful waterfront, right? And then from there, you could turn left or right and you're in this great area. But it's been a long road. It's been a terribly long road. And the only way we were able to make some of that happen was what Mr. Ramsey was involved with, was to pull out a whole city block out of the National Landmark District's HDRB approval process and put it into one process period. And their firm was involved in that. Again, right, wrong, or indifferent, that's how that happened. But that block that happened on was the only city block in the entire city that had no trees on it. It was a construction laydown yard owned by a local developer for many years. So that was a very blighted part of our community. Hence, some of the buildings that Ms. Sunderland talked to are long gone. They were torn down. That was an empty, kind of a dead zone. And we did put lots of money into Bladen to create parallel parking along the street line, to get sidewalks, curbs and gutters and stormwater, and all these incubator things trying to develop a sense of place. So then the Chamber of Commerce, Black Chamber, builds their building. They anchor that side. The developer at the time built the one building that now encroaches a little bit on the sidewalk. That building was built adjacent to or next door to the old construction office building, which was a fairly large building. In fact, sat in that empty field for so many years by itself. It was kind of an odd bird. You'll notice it today driving down that it sticks out on the curb because it was there first. The street was built around it. Anyways, here we are today with outside of that zone, but in the same corridor, we have a proposal for in this case, a 4-story structure. Ignoring all the fenestration, it's a 4-story structure, fairly narrow. And to Mr. Ramsey's point, the reason it's tall is because they can't get enough space in the building without going out. Well, they don't have a lot that big. Now, that's not anybody's problem. It's not my problem. It's not gonna be the board's problem that he can't fit as much space he wants into a building, because the option is build a smaller building, have less stuff in it. See, that's the easy answer. That's not the answer that the applicant wants to do. That's not our preview. Our preview is to say, is this mass and scale or conceptual appropriate for this location? One more thing before I let you guys have it is they did everything right based on the Miller documents and the guidelines were provided, which is if you're going to do a prominent structure and it is going to reach up into those types of stories, then the way to mitigate that is to set the top floor back off the street. So when you walk the street, you don't see that 4th story. That's done by our code. So to sit here and say that's wrong, it would be inappropriate. it is the right application to do. Doesn't mean it can get approved. It's just the right application if you were gonna try to do that. So here we are now with this, a building that I'm calculating is about 47 feet elevation. Okay, close. By the drawing we were presented, it looks like it's almost the same height as the chamber building. It might be a little taller by inches.
49.6 according to this, yeah.
Okay, so height is, is relative. I'm not concerned about the height. My gut feeling is because it's so narrow, the height's inappropriate. Because it's so small and the lot's so small, going up to me feels a little awkward. And I know that the applicant would love to see the river from the top of their building, but I think every applicant in Beaufort would like to do that.
Yep.
And just because they want to, don't mean they can. I'm not in support of the 4-story building there on those principles. I think the lot's too small for this height of a building in that location. I think a 3-story building is a stretch, but I think it could work. And I agree with some of the comments. I think it was staff comments about the fenestration of the lower level. If it's gonna be considered somewhat commercial, that should read more commercial. And then as you go up, the double porches are fine. Even enclosing a porch, I could almost live with because that design almost fits the style of the cantilevered building further down Bladen. So if you were to do an overstory porch built out, I think that would read well. And because they wouldn't take columns up to that second floor, but they would change the base commercial style column to the fenestration of a historic context column, and then that built-in environment above, I think would look well. It still looks well, but I think scale too big. That's my comments on it so far. Anybody else like to opine?
What's the main thrust for it being 4 stories? Is that you just are trying to get more heated square foot on the same lot? Why does it have to be 4 stories?
It doesn't have to be. I can take that square footage, I can push it down and push it over to the building next door, and we can still make everything work. It's just not as great. I'm trying to do a great building here.
So for you, your opinion is the reason to make it 4 stories is because you think it looks better.
It does
essentially.
look better, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it's gonna be way better. And more appropriate to the site.
Thanks for your presentation, because that was very interesting. I didn't know all of that about Bladen Street, so I appreciate that. I like the idea of a larger building anchoring that corner, but I do think it's too tall. And it's a shame you can't take some of these elements and, well, I guess you could, and get that great building without compromising too much. I mean, obviously it's a big deal to lose the whole top, but I think it's a shame that the lot is so small, and I just think it's really too big.
I actually like it. I know that my concern with the one we ruled on earlier with the ADU was that the code does not allow 4-story. Is there leeway given for this as well?
For height?
For stories, because doesn't the code say 3.5 stories?
It does, and they'd have to go for a variance to get that, but this is conceptual. So what would happen is if we gave them approval conceptually, they have some buy-in at that point. Then they would go to the next step to get the variance
From ZBOA?
from the ZBOA to go beyond that code. And then they would come back with a fenestration to show us how that arrangement would work.
Can I ask about that?
Yeah.
So let's say we did give approval for a 4-story building that was similar in height to this. Would the ZBOA still have the authority to say, actually, no?
Absolutely.
So even if we gave,
The ZBA has to have a hardship reason, all right? I doubt they're gonna have a reason to give them hardship reason, but that's their job. There's nothing hardship.
spell out
When
hardship,
you
yeah.
buy a 10-square-foot lot with
Yeah,
a
yeah.
20-square-foot building on it, that's your problem.
right. I actually appreciate the aspirational nature of it. I wish there would be more of that in Beaufort. I know there's a constant tension between keeping things as they were versus progress or aspiration. I actually lean more towards the aspiration side of things. So I like it. I had some problem with the details, but we can leave the details aside. That's, I mean, on mass and scale, that's kind of where I stand. I know you don't like that. I know I'm probably a lone wolf up here with that.
My feeling is whether I like it or not, the rules are the rules.
Well, that's why I asked about that.
And I'm against any four-story building.
Because
I
of
don't
the
care
rule
what it
or
looks like.
because of the rule or because of a different reason?
I mean, look at Washington DC. You can't build anything but a certain height. And there's a reason for that. Just like we have reasons here for not going above 3 stories.
Which are?
Well, it has to have a similar look, similar mass and scale. It can't overpower our image. I mean, our downtown area is the image of Beaufort, our history. And once we start letting things be tweaked, I mean, there are a lot of outside areas that we can use our imagination and our creativity. Mike mentioned Habersham earlier. I mean, it's a perfect example, beautiful architecture.
Didn't say that.
I did. I did.
You
I
did,
I
Eric did.
Yeah.
But it's not downtown historic Beaufort.
Mhm.
And that's where I stand.
Okay, so look, they're asking today, only thing we can do and should do is opine on mass and scale, which we're doing.
Mhm.
But we want to give them, I think you got to give some constructive comments as well. Like the example, if you were going to do a 44-story building, the setback is the appropriate way to do it, right? That's a positive. But you don't have to agree to that. You know, Beaufort City used to have, the old code was 50-foot max height, period. And then the new form code came in on the form-based code, and it started talking about stories. So then what happened is everybody wanted to do 10-foot ceilings, and there's 18-inch of floor framing between the next floor, and then you go with another 10-foot ceiling. And so that's why we see these buildings going up and up, because they can, but it still reaches into that zone of trying to reach the sky. So,
Well, that's why 7-Eleven Bladen is 3 stories, but it's the same height as this thing.
right.
So is the story the different thing that matters, or is the height? what
Well,
matters?
that's why that's why this is so important.
Yeah.
The scale and mass is important to discuss, because ignore what you see there and look just at silhouette and go, is that ridge height to the ground level, sidewalk level, is that appropriate for this location? And truly, it was already been spoken to, the corner lots or especially on main thoroughfares like this, or the prominent building location. If you're gonna put a building this size anywhere, that's the most appropriate space to do it. Not in a mid-block zone with small houses next to you. You anchor the corners that you see with a bigger structure is more appropriate based on our guidelines than doing it somewhere else. So that part works.
You've got across from at the park with the witness tree. You've got the Pat Conroy Center right there. I mean, they're all, Pat Conroy Center is a 1-story or 1.5 story.
Well, I've already said I don't support that height on it. I'm trying to look through these lines. I can visualize a nice 3-story wraparound porch structure there, or at least a double front porch facing Bladen or even facing the river. You know, I can sense that as a nice feel for that corner.
Yeah.
He's talking about having to move things out if you take it off. Upstairs is a bar. So is that, how much bar would you have to put somewhere? Like you could do away with the garage and put the bar in the garage? I know that's not happening, but because the bar needs to be in a view shed, it ain't gonna happen on the ground floor. It makes no sense. But there, you know, what you don't see in here subtly is the right side of the building. The reason the fenestration is listed that way, that's actually a garage, is hidden behind windows.
Right.
And so, you know, that's their desire to use it that way. And they just put a lot of money in putting a new infrastructure in that parking lot to be able to create the development. They put stormwater and parking and curbs and all the stuff in there, knowing that they were going to try to subdivide that into 2 or 3 parcels. So height.
Yeah, the you have to sell to certain people on here why it's gonna be so great that it should overcome a 3-story versus 4-story. In their mind. Can you? What makes it so great that it's worth going to 4 stories?
Well, there's, in my mind, there's a few items. When I take off that upper level, the space is not gonna go away. I'm just gonna move it
It's
down
gonna be
into the
squattier
third
and
floor.
fatter.
And I'm just gonna spread out that third level, unfortunately. So, nothing really disappears. It just, my massing starts to widen instead of being very focused on the corners. It's gonna start, in my mind, it hurts the building next door. And it also kind of takes away some of the beauty and elegance of the vertical nature on the corner. So I'm not scared of the height. I think it's pretty open. There's options on what we could do with that. Does it have to have a roof? Could it have a flat roof? Could it be a trellis? Could it just go away? I mean, there's a lot of options in there. I'm presenting to you guys what I think is perfect for that site. Back to your, giving a little inspiration. I do want folks to be inspired by this. I want folks to walk by and go, God, these guys are living the life. Like, they've got everything. They're up there watching the Super Bowl on their, on their balcony, looking at the river. And, what's wrong with giving somebody something to reach for, right? Like, if you don't give them something, you'll never get it. And I do think that we lack inspiration currently. I think there's a lot of buildings going up, and to your point about there's lots of places we can do it, you're right. But everyone looks to downtown. If you can't do something decent in downtown, why are you going to go out in the suburbs and do something even better? It's just not going to happen. It's going to get, it's a race to the bottom, right? They're going to try and get cheaper and cheaper, and let me just build a box. And it's exactly the opposite of what you think when it comes to that. The city of Beaufort has to grow responsibly, and it's coming, and we've got to manage it. Keep in mind, I've been on this site for 24 years. It's not like it's happening overnight. This is not a rapid paced development that everybody's like, oh my God, slow down Beaufort, right? Like, 24 years I've been working on Bladen Street. It's not gangbusters over there, and it's not going to change overnight. There is an opportunity here to inspire some folks, so, and have them reach a little bit bigger. That's it.
Thank you.
All right, folks. Remember, this should be a little bit easier than it seems like it is. I think this is one of those things where our guts are talking to us. We got one who's not so concerned.
I came in here questioning the 4-story, and I was gonna basically agree with all the staff recommendations because I thought it was too tall. I like the presentation. I'm a, I like Howard work and the Fountainhead, and he was an architect and he's aspirational. And so I'm pulling on my heartstrings on that. So I like that aspect of it. I came into it thinking more along the lines of Ms. Wilson, which was, the code is very specific about not 4 stories. And so I didn't feel like I have the authority to say yes to that. That's how I came in here. I also didn't think I could say yes to something bigger than 50%, but I was wrong about that. So I don't know what leeway we have to even say yay or nay on going beyond 3.5 stories.
Right.
Somebody thinks.
You want to answer that for him?
Kurt's going to have a different answer, but the answer is it has to start here. I can't go in front of ZBOA and even talk about it and stand a chance. And what, if this board hasn't said, we'd consider that. So you are the starting point. I've gotten plenty of variances before. It has to start here. And again, that's why I kind of have to give more detail than I want. It's because you got to start here. Then I can go to them. If they turn it down, it's over.
Oh, why is that not a city council thing?
Well, it's not,
Well-
council doesn't do that. That's what the zoning board of appeals gives those.
But they
abilities.
create the development code.
And
They did, and that's why we have what we have.
Yeah, so I mean, the city council is the legislative branch, right?
Right,
It's
right.
Congress, right? Whereas the zoning board of appeals is the judicial branch. So if you have a problem with what the legislative branch put in code, your appeal is the zoning board of appeals. Does that make sense? And as Mike referenced, he has to prove a hardship in the state of South Carolina, which it's self-imposed, right? There's no reason he has to build 4 stories, right? So that's gonna be impossible to overcome. But he's right, if you think it's an important thing, I mean, he needs your recommendation, they might just go for it, but I think you could also think we allow 3.5 stories, there's the option of the rooftop bar, there's other things you can think about.
I mean, if you round 3.5, it goes to 4.
I've been pretty consistent
That's
over my
true.
3 years here, and that I have voted against everything over 3 stories.
Yeah.
And I will remain true to that. I'm consistent, if nothing else.
I think it's
Sorry,
good.
Cooter.
That's fine.
All right, look, I've said it twice, I've said it one time, just for the board, this is the 4 of us gonna vote on this. To give him conceptual, I'm not gonna support the 4th story in my vote. I think that, the argument of, well, I'll just put it somewhere else, the bar and the deck, he's got 2 porches. I mean, really, you're gonna spend the money to put the bar on the deck and spread the building out? Fine. You've got a garage with a high pitched roof to the right. You could actually go a 3rd story on the garage and create even twice as much square footage, right? In other words, on that level, if it bumped out.
I think that's what he's saying. He
I
would-
know, and that's the point. When you look at this, if you look at
Right,
the
right,
elevation of it, you realize that, instead of having this little pinnacle, you just go out. Now we're more in keeping then with the other structures along Bladen that have gone this way so they could get the space they need and not go to 4 stories. He's asking, for that rare opportunity to do one, and he's asked for that before in other buildings and been turned down. But that's his job. His job is to be a designer. He's an architect.
Mhm.
He's gonna push this stuff in front of the boards, and I applaud him for that. I just think that we have held on for as long as we can with some small pieces of architectural components that represent Beaufort, that this is a stretch, it might be a little bit too far,
Mhm.
okay? And I, even though we're not gonna opine on the fenestration, I think the fenestration in this case he's put on here has hurt the ability to get this visually see it for me. I'd rather have seen this as a box and then not thought about, like right now, I'll be honest with you, if you came back to me with this design, 3 stories and looked just like this, I'd disapprove it. But I'm not gonna opine why, because that's not in front of us. But I will tell you, there's a lot of mixed pieces in here that seem like, and you made the comment, look, everything that we do in Beaufort and put it in one building. Well, that ain't gonna fly in my mind. Okay, I think you need to go back to a simplistic approach to fenestration that represents, as Miller says, similar materials arranged differently. And then that's after you get the scale done. I like the cleanness of the buildings down the street, even though people did not like the fact that I forget what they call it, that stepped over the sidewalk. That was a mistake maybe, but I like the clean lines. I even like the modern windows in it. Okay, I think that is talking about architecture of the future for Beaufort, not trying to cobble together all the stuff we did in the past into one building. So I'd rather see a more contemporary design that represents Beaufort in the sense of the fenestration of the porches, the simplistic nature of that stuff, the lap siding, like even Mr. Tully's building to the right, I think he's still, there used to be Patterson, that big bay window. That wouldn't have been approved today. That's disallowed by the Milner guidelines. So that's next door, but you see the difference of time and what's happened. So today it's a conceptual.
Well, it sounds like there's 3 no's for the 4 story. So I think there's enough to make a motion and a vote. Probably.
We put the table, the request, because we didn't know, he doesn't.
Yeah, we have an option to table it
Yeah, that was the recommendation.
and bring it, but how would the applicant feel? I mean, I don't think you're gonna get a 4-story agreed today.
If I hear 3 saying no. If I hear 3 saying no, if it's okay with you guys, we'll just withdraw the application.
So then you guys would want to just table it. Is that correct?
Yeah, we would get a motion to table, and that's non-debatable, and we'll just move on.
Yeah, or we can withdraw and y'all can just go home.
But if you table, you still got to bite at the apple. You're gonna have to come back anyways, but it'd be the same application, then
I'm
we'll
okay with
change
the
this.
table.
You okay to table?
Yeah.
So it's non-debatable when we table, so just I need one motion and we'll table this thing, and then it can be retabled.
I make a motion to table this project.
All right, that's non-debatable. Make a motion is passed because it's non-debatable. We're gonna pass the tabling. So look, the only way to bring that back on the table is for one of us to bring it back. So if the applicant comes up and the staff says he'd like to bring that back up, all we gotta do is put this application back on the table. Okay,
Thank you, guys.
all right.
Now we need a motion to adjourn, unless there's other business.
And that closes out all the properties we were looking at today, but we may have some staff comments. Let's get reminders on training and some other stuff, right?
Yeah, just a reminder, 9 o'clock on Friday, we're doing the tour. We're gonna start at 500 Carteret Street. We're gonna look at a lot of stuff, and, there'll be a, large, golf cart for those that want to be on the golf cart. And then we'll, end up at the Cuthbert House, but we'll have, lunch at, Low Country Produce.
Nice.
Good, very
Man, you
good.
guys, I love your lunches y'all do.
Can I want to comment on one thing, unrelated to those specific projects, but related to projects in general. One thing that I think would be helpful for me is to see the overall timeline that the applicant went through. So if there's just a one sheet that shows the initial application was on this date, they went to a TRC meeting on this date, it is in there.
Well, the timeline's in there because, we have the TRC in the
I know, but
packet.
you have to dig it. Is it,
Do you just want me to put it, do you just want us to put it in like the staff report, like the application date and then HTRC meeting?
right, I'm saying just because I can find the dates for each of those things, it's on the application. There's a separate letter with that. I'm saying it would be helpful to have just a cheat sheet that says, in one view, I could see how protracted has this process been?
Okay,
Or how streamlined has it been?
well, it's all there. You can find it. So it's, but, we can
I
do
don't want to have to look through 50 pages to then synthesize all the different dates.
All right, that's fine. Sure.
Okay. Well, any other business from staff to us? We have a training on Friday, which is the walk around or the golf cart around.
Golf
We have-
cart, and we're also doing the Freedman's Art District's also doing a presentation at their, new structure for part of it. Yeah. So it's a lot. It's a lot of things. So we'll see if we get through it all, but, we'll stop at 12:30 no matter what.
Cool. Exciting. I move to adjourn.
We're adjourned.